Welcome to episode 3 of the Wizard Tower Ad Podcast. This is your host, Cryomancer Lex. And today, we're going to talk about social media automation, as well as a potentially controversial topic, which is fandoms. That's sure to be a lot of fun. So let's get right into it. But before, allow me to tell you about today's big artist showcase. Today's artist is Viktor Vaznetsov. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He was a Russian artist who specialized in mythological and historical subjects. He is considered the co-founder of the Russian folklorist and romantic nationalistic painting. His body of work includes one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, depictions of God the Father and Christ as a child, which is not very common if you think about it, the depiction of Christ as a kid or a teenager, while still maintaining the sense of authority and presence you'd expect from a messiah. As a folklorist and religious painter, his pieces include the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as well as depictions of angels and heaven. Even if you're not into Christianity, I really recommend that you check him out. Aesthetically, it's some of the most... I'm going to use the word bishonen to borrow from Japanese aesthetics. Very pretty boy quality. Big eyes, deep stares, nice hair. Really hope you check him out. Viktor Vaznetsov. Right, so with that out of the way, let's talk about our big art topic of the day. And today we're going to talk about social media automation. As the first big topic of the day, this has to have some sort of practical approach to things. And so I'm going to review a few of the apps I like to use to better manage my workflow. If you are serious about your digital art career, you cannot divorce the idea that the internet has to be your platform as a whole. So let's get started. I'll add links on the description to each and every one of these programs. Though I have to tell you, I am not being endorsed or paid by any of them, just so you know. The first app I want to talk about is IFTTT, spelled IFTTT. The name stands for if this then that, and the app does exactly what you think. Whenever a certain condition is met, mainly posting your art in some website, there are applets, which is the discrete units of automation this program uses, to repost it somewhere else. You even have the opportunity to transform the tags to something that fits the format of the page you want them to go in. For example, I'm currently using this app so that every time I upload one of my art pieces to Instagram, I automatically get it posted on Tumblr. I think it is a great tool, and it is completely free. You can also use custom web hookups, which in layman's terms means a request for a custom service that you can then respond to. For example, you can use a very simple tutorial so that whenever you post in social media, it gets reposted on your Discord server by a bot. So I really hope you check them out. It's ifttt.com. That's ifttt.com. It will make your life so much easier and help you keep that flow of content. And speaking of flow, I want to move on to Buffer. Buffer is a social media management tool which serves as a queue for posting. It has a relatively robust free option program, though you can also upgrade to a premium version of sorts. Their free plan includes up to 3 social accounts, which if you're just starting out and or your business venture, let's say, is just about you, it's perfectly fine. You can add your Instagram, you can add your Twitter, you can add your Facebook. The only disadvantage I see with this program is its limited list of social media. So it's just Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. And Pinterest is paywalled, so you won't have DeviantArt or Pixiv. On the upside, Buffer is wonderful for 3 main reasons, in my opinion. The first one is automatic scheduling. So you go to a website, you Google an aggregation of data, you ask, when would it be the best time for me to post my content? And of course, that depends on what type of content you're making and your demographics. For example, in my case, I see that my best posting hours are 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and 5 p.m. And I suspect this has to do with the fact that these are the specific times for entering school, having a lunch break, and or perhaps when people get out of work. So it makes sense. And so, as it has been demonstrated, there can be such a thing as diminishing returns when it comes with posting on social media. You don't want to come off as spammy, and yet you want to grow your audience and have people notice that you do exist. You are competing with everyone else in the world after all. And so I found that the best way to go about this is to have 2 or 3 tweets and or posts and or pieces of art I've made queued into Buffer on my Twitter account. And so a bit of discipline has to enter here because ideally the content should not stop. And so you can take one day out of your week to really sit down and queue everything you'll need to upload during that week. That would be the best way to go about it if you want to get the benefits of working as an artist without the inherent disadvantages of, let's say, a common job, which requires you to be doing the thing actually during the entire day. You know what I mean? And so that's Buffer. You can upload images, you can upload videos, you can even select the thumbnail for the video as taken from parts of it. You can add hashtags and mention people. And the most important benefit, in my opinion, is that you can enter this and create this content without having to actually look at Twitter, which, as we all know, is the most addicting thing ever. There is currently a dog in the background. I really hope you don't hear it. I'm gonna try to filter him out, but it might very well result in having this weird, like, filtery sound. But, well, what you gonna do? So, these are some of the apps I use for content control. But what about you? The most important part about a constant stream of content is you actually making it. This goes beyond drawing. It could very well be a podcast just like this. It could be recording a live action video. And a way to do this is scheduling. We all have different temperaments, and discipline is something that doesn't come to us very easily. So if you need to properly set up a time control, we have such powerful devices with us at all times in the form of phones, and most people don't take full advantage of them. Have you seen Google Calendar? How easy it is to use? I know it sounds like a commercial, but I'm being honest here. It has never been easier and cheaper, well, after buying your phone obviously, to set up a schedule to track, and it's already automatically interconnected, assuming you let Google take your soul, as most people already have, but that's a topic for another day. You can set up your schedule with Google Calendar and then access that calendar on your computer without having to change a single thing and other devices. You can set up reminders, you can make up a schedule. It doesn't matter if you have work, it doesn't matter if you have school, or you have a family to attend to. If you can create this schedule, this consistent approach to things, your brain will automatically adapt to it and make it easier for you to do over and over and over, like most things. You don't think about what you're doing while you're walking. Sometimes you don't even think about what you're doing while you're working or at school because it's just automatic mode. If we can manage to make a habit out of the things we do, which these apps helps us with, then we will be very productive. And that's great. Even if you're not necessarily hustling for like a serious art-based income project, this form of habit will certainly help you improve your art so that you can better project that vision you have in your brain into the real world. Thank you for listening to the Wizard Tower Art Podcast. Allow me to use this intermission to remind you to hydrate and sleep properly. I'll keep trying to come up with interesting things to say here while I get some sponsors. I hope you don't mind. Today's small artist showcase goes to Akumano Robin at Dosfleurgrab. That is DOSFLEURGRAB at Dosfleurgrab. She's an artist from Buenos Aires, Argentina, that makes surrealist, candy gore, and space-themed art. She has developed some wonderful starsonas, you could say, which is the personification of spatial entities as original characters. She has a wonderful style and is a wonderful person, so I hope you check her out at Dosfleurgrab on Twitter, and Art Kumano Robin on Tumblr. As always, links will be in the description. So today's topic of the day is fandoms. And I really want to lay out a few points, but I want to start with my personal opinion. My experience with fandoms is relatively scarce. When I grew up, I really liked Sonic the Hedgehog, for example. But living in a country where most children did not have video game consoles at the time, this is the mid-90s and the late 90s, there were not enough people for me to form a clique or a group or anything resembling a fandom. As I grew up and Tumblr became a thing, I saw what would eventually become a very divisive section of the internet. Now this is start of the internet era. Well, not really. We've had the internet for 30 or 40 years now, if you count the bulletin board system and other forms of primitive internet communication. But I mean more of a Web 2.0 setting, where most websites are visual and easy to access for the general public. So you have the beginnings of Tumblr, the beginnings of DeviantArt, you have Newgrounds in the arena, you have Something Awful, you have 4chan. And on these websites, the most divisive fandoms or polarizing fandoms, both in regards to themselves and to the general public, were Sonic the Hedgehog, My Little Pony, furries, which have enough information about them to warrant its own video, and Trekkies, who have been here since the beginning of time and will be here when we're all gone. And so, a fandom has many benefits, but also many drawbacks. And I will start with the benefits. People who grew up feeling ostracized from society, who felt like nobody understood them and clung into this intellectual property, finally felt accepted with other people who were willing to dress up as characters from that series, they were willing to speak about the lore and the story of this IP at length for hours, who were willing to write fan fiction for it. It was like a secondary family of people who got you. And as being a nerd became more and more popular, cons became a very serious business, and people would finally be able to externalize their love for the thing they're a fan of. Now here's the negative. As with any social group, people have very different temperaments. So in the scale of being introverted to extroverted, or in the scale of being comfortable with who you are and not, you'd have people being too vocal about the fandom to each other and to society. People who would make it obnoxious to talk about the topic. If you currently feel apprehension towards watching Rick and Morty, or let's say Good Omens, or you feel uneasy about playing Undertale, you know what it is to have this sense of too much caused by the fandom. You have that problem, and I've heard people lay out the argument that you don't have to be part of a community to enjoy something. If you want to see something that most people try to shove on your face online, just watch it yourself and don't let people ruin it for you. But I would argue that enjoying something is inherently a social experience, because when you watch something that you like and it changes you, normally you want to communicate to other people that it changed you, or you want to recommend it to people, even if it's your closest friends. Enjoying something is more meaningful when you can tell another person, this resonated with me, and I hope it does with you, because if that happens, it means we both resonate with one another. Yes, you can sit down and enjoy watching the spectacle of something you enjoy, but if you're not sharing it with anyone, unless it's a serious philosophical conversation, which is more educational than just a series, you will just say, oh, that was cool, that was very cool, and that's it. You will continue your day. There would be no one to ask what if the ending was different. There will be no one to ask, oh, who was your favorite character and why. It's not something you constantly articulate to yourself. And so that might get ruined if you come up to your friends and you're like, oh, hey, I found this thing and I enjoyed it, and they're already rolling their eyes because their Twitter feed or their other group of friends would just not shut up about it. And it's even worse if you're socially awkward, because sometimes you will simply not realize that you are the person who's not shutting up about it. Sometimes you find people who don't like a show, and you just try to ask them to watch it over and over and over until they will specifically not watch it because you were so insistent. Right, so we have that aspect of it, which is the extroversion and the attempt to communicate your likes to someone else. Now you have the other aspect, which is the way people consume and enjoy art and the feedback it produces. We live in an era where we're able to communicate directly with the creators of the things we enjoy, be it a comment section on YouTube or sending an email or a tweet to a person who works at a movie studio making something we enjoy. And so you have, roughly speaking, because there's many nuance to this, you have fans who enjoy something by sending hearts and love and support and sharing and tweeting and talking about things, and you have other people who like to criticize out of love, which I think has lately become demonized as something inherently negative, but I disagree with that notion, because people are not perfect. I'm not the sort of person to go out and criticize something I like, mostly because I think it's in bad taste. It has become such kind of a... We've socially agreed that that's not nice to do. But you're totally within your right to do it if you feel inclined to do so. So there's people who criticize things, and there's various degrees of criticism. You have your obvious, this sucks, this is pandering, which sometimes you can just dismiss because there's no constructive criticism there. But there's people who write 3 paragraphs worth of, I really enjoyed this, but you ruined it, and I don't like it, and this is why, and you should change, and you should improve it. And this is normally taken as a bad thing. This is in part, I think, because of YouTube's commentary community and the slew of people who came out of the woodwork to say, see that thing you like? It sucks. Click this video to see why. And so there's that clickbaity aspect to it. But criticism in and of itself can be a very sincere thing. Even the most popular example of internet criticism, as far as I can see, which is Red Letter Media's seminal criticism of Star Wars, people in current year, let's say, would dismiss it as just internet tryhards and trolls just trying to put down everything people do. But I think it's precisely this culture of complacency that has resulted in the degradation of the quality of films lately. And please allow me to elaborate, because I don't want to just come off as someone who says, oh, everything was better, now everything sucks. No. I want to be very specific. People criticize the things they love. The people who like criticizing things vocally do so because they feel like the thing they're enjoying is not as good as it could be, as it had the potential to be. A good example about this is Star Trek. Specifically because even if you don't like Star Trek, you might know by osmosis, basically, that it's a show in space about society. And a show in space with planets and stars and civilizations and languages and all sorts of situations, and the change of culture represented in it gives you room for so many things, so many different things. And so people have high expectations for it. But when you don't criticize, or when you take criticism as something inherently negative, then other people see that they don't really have to try nearly enough to get the views or get something technically successful. Now, here's a very contemporary example, and it's the Lion King remake. The Lion King remake has been extensively criticized online for its lack of soul, let's say, which is a colloquial term to refer to the fact that the 3D models do not look very lifelike. They look photorealistic, but they don't have very nice expressions or immediately palpable emotions. This is, of course, a generalization. Now, when somebody criticizes this, I don't know why people don't get that this does not mean that the entire show or movie is wrong or bad or shouldn't exist. If you look up the Lion King's conceptual art, you will see that concept artists had this vision, a very lively and wonderful vision of the Lion King's world. And the animals had expressions and feelings, and it felt completely different. And so you're left to assume that whatever happened was not the fault of the animators or the fault of the concept artists, but the people directing them. And so the fault, quote unquote, goes to a specific person. Now, do people properly focus their concerns and their criticism to the specific people? No, they don't. We have a very famous example of Star Wars where the actress that portrays the character Rose got a lot of criticism for something that was, in my opinion, better left to the writers themselves. And you might be the type of person that says now, but why even attack the writers? Like, what do you get out of it? And my answer to that is, it's all in the details. There's a very big difference between, oh, you ruined Star Wars, F you, I'm gonna ruin your life, blah blah blah, and I didn't like this because of this, I hope you do it better next time. And now you might say Star Wars fans, for example, are too passionate a bunch to do this properly and sensibly, but if anything, that passion just proves how much they like it. So after all of this rambling, to close on the on the criticism part of fandoms. I think some amount of criticism is acceptable and desirable to keep up a good product. But we need to change our outlook of things, and we certainly need to change the way we interact with the platforms that big tech companies give us, because the birth of this was nothing but a result of adapting to an algorithm that will reward you for having controversial opinions. But that's human nature, and I don't think there's a way for us to run away from it until we actually arrive at Star Trek world, where everything is pristine and beautiful. So here's another aspect of fandoms. This is something I've been thinking about for a while. It is a dark topic, but I think it's necessary to cover if we're going to talk about fandoms. And it's this chaotic mess that has resulted from modernity, where anime fans have joined the mainstream in series. We have Crunchyroll, we have Netflix, anime has become bigger than ever. And yet, the opinion of people about anime is constantly shifting. And even though anime did not invent this problem, it has certainly exacerbated it, or it has put a light on it, and that is our attitude towards minors. As far as I understand it, it is very common in Japanese culture to, or rather in shonen, manga and anime, to sexualize characters for comic relief, or simply because they are aware that the target audience are teenagers, and teenagers are very interested in those topics, since they're just discovering themselves, let's say. And this has clashed horribly with Western audiences. There's been a divide, because in general terms we have a completely different moral system from Japan and the East. And so the situation is like this. You have an anime, like for example My Hero Academia, or Mob Psycho, very popular at the moment, where the main characters are teenagers, and it's very common for Japanese fans and artists to depict them in, I don't want to even say overtly sexual manner, because of course that does happen, but that happens with everything on the internet. But I mean, even when they're flirtatious, they have bedroom eyes, they have a suggestive pose, or they're wearing skimpy clothing, for example. And people have concerns with this, of course. And the concern is not inherently bad, but it can lead to situations where people don't hear each other. So if you want to solve a problem, you normally have a position, and you talk to a person who has a different position, you come to a compromise, or if the compromise is impossible, you let them have it in exchange of something else, or they let you have it in exchange of something else, and then you move on with your life. But when you have a group of people that hate another group of people, and whenever they try to communicate, they just ignore one another, nothing gets resolved. And all of this preamble is for me to establish that I want to dig a little bit deeper into this topic, and I understand if you don't feel comfortable with it. But I think it's important to be truthful and thorough when it comes to something like this. Now, what are the arguments? You have one group of people, Group A, who outright hates depictions of sexuality in media, especially when it's supposed to be for the general public, because we have been taught in a Western society to regard sexuality as a whole as an adult topic, which makes sense. Now, here's the thing. So this group hates this. They see the problems of the real world. We have pedophilia. We have terrible abuse of children, even if it's not sexual. We have human trafficking. We live in a world where horrible things happen. And for these people to see other people enjoying and condoning and promoting what is essentially anything from having a teenager be in a suggestive pose to outright, lolicon and the depiction of children in sexual acts, they abhor it equally, because it's all part of the same family of content. Right, that's one position. And beyond the mere fact that to them this is enabling horrible behavior, it is also used to groom minors into doing this sort of thing, which also is terrible. Now we have Group B, and already I can see this being the wrong way to approach it, because you cannot just box everybody into two camps. There's many people who lay somewhere in the middle, including me, by the way. But I implore you that you finish listening to this so that you understand where I'm coming from. And of course, I'm also always, and we should all be willing to evolve and change our opinion as the facts present themselves. You have people on the other camp saying, these children and teenagers are fictional, therefore it doesn't matter. Just the way violence in video games doesn't make you a violent person, this bears no effect to what people do in the real world. Now, here's some interesting things to consider. It has been demonstrated that it's not that people who play Grand Theft Auto, for example, become violent killers, but rather people who are already violent are drawn to Grand Theft Auto and then go out and do the thing. So it was not the game who changed them, it was their prevalent temperament that led them to such behavior. And other external factors, of course, but I'm generalizing. And so, in the same manner, if you enjoy something that is considered disgusting by society, it still doesn't mean that you've done anything illegal or wrong because you're not hurting any real people. If you're in this camp, you can also make the argument that even if this kind of content has been demonstrated to be used on real minors who are victims of trafficking and abuse, to groom them, if you were to remove absolutely every single piece of content of this nature, these people would still be doing the same thing, except with real footage of real children. That the intent doesn't change. And finally, when it comes to the viewpoint of this group B, while there are certain people who feel a sexual urge towards minors, it is not the same people specifically who also have a sexual urge towards fictional minors, because they're not the same thing. Anime characters who are supposed to be little girls most of the time act like adults. It's just their body. And that's a bit weird. I actually don't get it personally, but I try to understand the difference, and I do think it is an important difference. Let me put it this way, just in the way not all furries are also zoophiles, not all lolicons are also pedophiles. Now, if your definition of pedophile also includes fictional children, then of course they are still pedophiles. But the whole point of words is for us to properly categorize concepts, which is why I think the word lolicon even came into the West without being immediately changed into pedophile, up until recently. Here's some interesting data. There's a Wikipedia article dedicated specifically to the relationship between child pornography and child sexual abuse. While we know that Wikipedia on itself is not to be taken as a trustworthy scientific journal, it does contain references that often are. And unfortunately for us, in this case, this one article costs money. So if you do want to take a detailed look at it, you'll have to do it by yourself. Milton Diamond from the University of Hawaii presented evidence that legalizing child pornography is linked to lower rates of child sex abuse. Results from the Czech Republic indicated, as in everywhere else studied, Canada, Croatia, Denmark, Germany, Finland, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Sweden, and the USA, that rape and other sex crimes have, quote, decreased or essentially remained stable, unquote, following the legalization and wide availability of pornography. All kinds of pornography. It also says that the incidence of child sex abuse has fallen considerably since 1989, when child pornography became readily accessible, a phenomenon also seen in Denmark and Japan. The findings support the theory that potential sexual offenders use child pornography as a substitute for sex crimes against children. While the authors do not approve the use of real children in the production or distribution of child pornography, they say that artificially produced materials might serve a purpose. Now, how do I feel about this? I am actually a bit in the middle. I don't consume this kind of content when it comes to lolicon, but I don't see that much of a problem in the sexualization of fictional teenagers, because it's so weird to me. You have to bear with me for a second, because I come from Mexico, where the adulthood legally starts at 18, and the age of consent, I think it's somewhere between 16 and 18. And Mexican women tend to be shorter. According to the 2014 journal Admixture in Latin America, Geographic Structure, Phenotypic Diversity, and Self-Perception of Ancestry based on 7,342 individuals, that's a mouthful, the average female height in Mexico is 159 centimeters, which is 5 foot 2.5 inches, which means that from 13 years of age to 20 years of age, some women don't grow more than an inch or two taller. Now, of course, I'm not saying that this has any bearing in the morality of abusing children. Of course not. But what I mean is, they look very similar until you interact with them and understand their demeanor and the way they behave, the rational mind. And this also happens in Japan. In Japan, people are short, therefore it is harder for you to see the nuance of the difference in their physiology from teenager to adulthood. Now, another important thing is that for some reason, I see people acting as if though when you're 17 years old and it's your birthday tomorrow, you're one kind of person, and as soon as you go to sleep and you wake up, it's like The Sims where you just spin around and become adult you. Of course that doesn't happen. You grow in incremental amounts, and the legal age we've established as a society is nothing but a convenience of our legal system so that we can easily discern whether or not somebody should be put to jail. I think we should treat people who like fictional minors in a sexual manner the way we treat people with other uncommon fetishes. We should make it very clear that it is not the social consensus for that to be acceptable. People who like this, in my opinion, should be a little bit more careful as to not to make it so public, mainly because it's obnoxious, but also because the general populace are very, very vocal when they find something to be disgusting. But I don't think it should be illegal, and I don't think it should be grounds for banning or deleting you online, or assuming that the person is, as a whole, is an evil person for enjoying this. That is my position. Of course, I will be very interested in hearing your position, and I am always willing to evolve and change as I said, as the facts present themselves. Unfortunately, and I don't want to generalize, people who are very adamant about banning people who think like this, or immediately block them or disregard them as just, psychopaths, it's very common for them to have no argument except for, ew, it's disgusting, and that's it. Or they usually come with the idea of grooming, which I've already discussed. And on the other side, I don't agree with people who just want to keep it as something normal, and because here I mean normal in the statistic sense, not in the normal or abnormal sense. Again, not on legal grounds, but on social etiquette grounds. I personally think people shouldn't have to put up with your fetish if you're just flaunting it everywhere. Going back to the hoodie with the anime girls. That went from being a quirky, perhaps misguided attempt at being cool, but is now more often than not used just to insult the very people who don't like it, which is obviously not the best way to fix any sort of social disagreement. It's not something you'd get in jail for, but people would and should give you back looks to communicate that they're not comfortable with it, if that's the way they genuinely feel, or try not to associate with you, so that you might have a harder time finding other like-minded individuals. If you made it this far into the podcast, I really appreciate that you stayed around. These topics are complex and difficult, but I think they are important for a podcast that deals with art and the way it interacts with social media and our modern society at large. This has been episode 3 of the Wizard Tower Art Podcast. If you have any other serious social topics to discuss in regards to art and media, let me know in the comments below. Before you go, I'd really appreciate if you were to subscribe to this channel and follow us on Twitter. Links are in the description. And remember to come back for next episode, which is every Tuesday at 2 p.m. EST. Have a great week. Bye bye.